Folks, welcome back to another episode of the Friday Flows. It is Friday, and it's time to get flowing. It's time to get some automation coursing through my veins because it's episode 40. And on episode 40, folks, we've come a long way to get to this point. But what I'm going to be covering in today's episode is probably one of the biggest questions that I get, and I know the majority of our team gets when we're speaking to anyone that's evaluating Tines or looking at the platform for the first time. And the question is, what do you integrate with? Can you integrate with X? Can you integrate with Y? Can you integrate with Z? Because that's going to be key to us being able to fulfill our use cases and Tines. And this is a really interesting question because Tines integrates completely differently to what you're going to see in the market. But the question is, why do we do that? Well, when it comes to integration in general, it's a huge issue. Tools are siloed, ever-growing tech stacks. But when it comes to the category that we play in the most, which is SOAR, ultimately Hinchy and TK, who founded Tines, their whole experience with SOAR is that it was rigid when it came to integration. They basically operated on an application-based integration model, meaning that the SOAR vendor would have a list of integrations built. And if you wanted to connect to something outside of that list, you're looking at a 4 to 6 week wait time for your own devs to build it out, or you had to go to the vendor. And that was already insanely expensive, as well as the time and the resources that go into it. So that was the big problem that they had when it came to SOAR. Now, the idea of Tines was to solve that by completely doing away with wrappers. So to kind of explain this in a little bit better words than I could put it, I'm going to share over this blog. This blog was written 2 years ago, but it's still very relevant today. And it's called Solving the Integration Problem. Now, Hinchy states a really interesting case when it comes to integration. He says, when you buy a box of crayons, you're restricted to using the colors that come in the box. If you need a color that's not in the box, too bad. If you want to connect your workflows to a tool and your SOAR doesn't support that corresponding app, too bad. That's how I describe traditional SOAR integration in a nutshell. So the idea of Tines was to get rid of wrappers and connect to whatever you want to. Remember, Tines is not an opinionated platform. We want to say, hey, what's your process? What do you want to connect to? Here's the ability to do it. That's Tines in a nutshell. It's how we do it. So people ask us, like, does Tines integrate with X? We see it as an opportunity because more often than not, they want to understand whether Tines will fit all of their use cases. And the reality is Tines can fit a lot more use cases than people think. Yes, we operate as a SOAR, but an entire business can leverage it. And the reason that an entire business can leverage Tines is due to the flexibility around integrations. So let's show you what that actually looks like. So when we get into Tines itself, right, you can drag out a HTTP request. This is the action that gives us our flexibility. So we can support any kind of API, REST APIs, SOAP APIs, internal APIs. So that's configuring this from scratch. Let's say the second means that you can integrate something or connect is to search it in our template library. So if I search, let's say, Elastic Security, drag out the templates, have a look, see what works for me, query Elastic Similars. That's the second means of integrating, connecting to what you use. The third way is called curl to Tines, and this is the magic of Tines, right? Let's say you're looking for a tool. Stripe's a good example because it's not a security or an IT tool that we use commonly, right? And let's say with this, we don't have anything built out, but you do have an API. Okay, what we can do here is I can go to their API doc and I can find, like, let's say, an authentication request, find a curl command like this, copy it, come back into Tines and paste it. So that's a connection built with Stripe instantaneously with a copy and paste. Okay, you can see here as we click in, like, you can see everything's already coming in configured on the right side. Now, let's say you're saying to yourself, okay, well, what if I don't have an API that has a lovely curl command like you just showed me? Well, we can go into something like Workbench or any kind of LLM. But let's say we go to Tines Workbench and I say, hey, give me a curl command. And I do apologize for my spelling, for a Stripe payment of them. You can see my dyslexia on display here. Hopefully it fixes that. There we go. So give me a curl command for a Stripe payment authentication. I can ask Benchy for that. And ultimately what it's going to produce here is it's going to produce an answer with a curl command and some important notes. I can copy this. I can come back into Tines. I can paste it. And again, like, it's as simple as that. So even if you don't have well-defined API documentation, that's the way that you do it, right? The other way, the other question I get is, well, what if I don't have an API? Well, what we can do in that example is you can go into the template library here. You can search for Python because you can run scripts in times if you need to. And ultimately, what we're going to do is run a Python script, and you can connect it up using a Python Bash or PowerShell script. Yeah, and that's as simple as you can make it here with times when it comes to integrations. There's all the options on the table to connect whatever you need to connect to. So that's how we solve the integration problem, is obviously making it easy to connect to any API and giving you the ability to connect to anything that doesn't necessarily have an API. So if that was informative, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed it, like and repost to your network. And ultimately, folks, if there's anything that you want to see in the series, do let me know in the comments, whether it's a new technology, whether it's a use case, any kind of technique that you'll see commonly in Tides. And as always, thank you so much for watching. We will catch you in the next one. Cheers.